A man who believes he controls the world is about to learn his world is owned by the one person he disrespects. Julian Vance, a titan of finance, decides to take his ambitious mistress, Chloe, on a lavish yacht vacation. He whisks her away to Serafina Key, the most exclusive unopened private island resort in the Caribbean. He plans to impress her, indulge his ego, and finalize his plan to leave his quiet, pregnant wife. But the paradise he's chosen holds a secret. The island's mysterious owner is waiting, and she's about to turn his tropical getaway into a public execution of his entire life. Julian Vance loved the reflection he saw in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse. He saw a man who had earned his view, a sharp, 40-year-old predator of the financial markets, clad in a Tom Ford suit with a Patek Philippe on his wrist that was worth more than most houses. His firm, Vance Capital Partners, had just closed a brutal quarter, and he had personally gutted 2 rival funds. He deserved a reward. His gaze drifted to the woman sitting quietly on a cream-colored sofa, her hands resting on the gentle swell of her 6-month pregnancy. Elena, his wife. She was, he had to admit, beautiful in a classical, forgettable way. Old money, the Sandoval family. But their influence had seemed to fade, reduced to quiet philanthropy and academic endowments. He'd met her at a charity gala, been charmed by her serene difference, and married her. He'd seen her as the perfect accessory, graceful, quiet, and from a good family that required no maintenance. Now, her pregnancy had made her domestic, tired. She was always talking about nurseries, or her doctor's appointments, or the charity luncheon she was organizing. It was, in a word, boring. "The jet is filed for a 7 a.m. departure tomorrow," he announced, adjusting his cuffs. "The board meeting in Zurich is non-negotiable." Elena looked up, her dark eyes clear. "Of course, Julian. Will it be long?" Dr. Matthews wanted to discuss the 3rd trimester schedule. "A week, maybe 10 days." He waved a dismissive hand. "It's a complex merger. You know how it is." She did not know how it was. He never explained. He just expected her to nod, which she did. "Please be safe then. I'll have your travel bag sent down to the driver." "Thank you, darling." He kissed the top of her head, the gesture automatic and cold. The board meeting in Zurich was, in fact, a 24-year-old junior analyst named Chloe Decker. Chloe was the antithesis of Eleanor. She was all sharp angles, bright lipstick, and a raw, relentless ambition that Julian found intoxicating. She didn't want to talk about nurseries. She wanted to talk about IPOs, hostile takeovers, and which restaurant had the longest wait list. His real plan was far from a stuffy Swiss boardroom. His new yacht, the Orion, a sleek 150-foot vessel, was currently waiting for him in the Bahamas. Chloe was already there, having flown commercial, a detail he'd insisted on for discretion. From there, they would sail to the most talked-about, most secretive destination in the high-net-worth world. Serafina Key. It was a brand-new, hyper-exclusive private island resort that hadn't even officially opened. Rumor was it cost $1 billion to build. An eco-luxury paradise where the villas were 3D printed from sustainable materials, and the privacy was absolute. Getting a reservation was impossible. But Julian Vance knew people. A few calls, a wire transfer to a discreet holding company, and he had secured the Royal Triton Villa for 10 days, starting the day after tomorrow. He was going to give Chloe the vacation of a lifetime. He was going to indulge in every way he felt he'd been denied. He pictured the turquoise water, the white sand, Chloe laughing as they drank Krug champagne on the deck. "Julian?" Elena's voice was soft, pulling him from his reverie. "Yes." I transferred the quarterly allowance to the Children's Foundation account. The one you asked me to oversee. Good. Good. He had set up that foundation for her as a project to keep her busy. It was his tax write-off. He found it quaint that she took it so seriously, tracking every dollar. See? You're a natural at it. I just want to make sure everything is in order, she said, rising slowly from the sofa. She placed a hand on his arm. Just be careful in Zurich. It's cold there. I'll be fine, Elena. I always am. He watched her walk toward the master bedroom, her gait already heavy with their child. A pang of something, not guilt, but perhaps inconvenience, pricked at him. The timing of the pregnancy was messy. He'd already been seeing Chloe for 3 months when Eleanor tearfully announced the miracle. He had been planning his exit. The pregnancy had delayed it, but it wouldn't stop it. He pulled out his phone, a secure, encrypted device. J. Wheels up at Euro 700. Handle the jet. The reply from his executive assistant was immediate. EA. Confirmed. Gulfstream is fueled. Flight plan filed for Zurich. He smiled. He then opened a different app. J. Zurich tomorrow. The bird flies south. See you soon. The reply from Chloe was almost instant. A selfie of her in a bikini on a sun lounger, a mischievous pout on her lips. See. Hurry up, boss. Paradise is waiting. Julian Vance turned back to the window, the New York skyline glittering like a carpet of diamonds at his feet. He had it all. The wife, the mistress, the empire, the escape. He was untouchable. The Gulfstream GI-50 cut through the dawn sky, banking southeast, not northeast, toward Europe. Julian's pilots were professionals. They valued the 8-figure bonuses he paid them for their skill and, more importantly, their silence. The flight plan logged in the public FAA database read ZRH, Zurich. The internal navigation, however, was locked on the private airfield in Nassau. Julian slept for most of the flight, waking only to a glass of whiskey and a final review of his actual business, the messages from Chloe. She was getting impatient. She was also getting bold. City. Julian, this resort better be worth it. The concierge at the hotel here is terrible. He didn't even know my name. J. Patience, Chloe. Where we're going, the staff will know your blood type if you ask them to. It's called Serafina Key. You can't even find it on Google Maps. C. Oh, mysterious. I like it. Does your wife even know what Google Maps is? J. Be nice. Elena is traditional. C. She's a relic, Julian. You're a predator. Predators don't stay with house cats. He smirked. Chloe understood him. She saw his power. She wasn't content to arrange flowers. She wanted to help him burn down forests. He remembered briefly how he'd met Elena. It was at a dusty university fundraiser for the Sandoval wing of the library. She was there representing her family. He'd been dragged along by a client. She was wearing a simple navy dress, no jewelry, and was discussing medieval literature with a doddering professor. He'd seen her as a project, a beautiful, untouched piece of classic art to be acquired and displayed. Her family, the Sandovals, were quiet. Her father, a man named Carlos, had been a widower, a soft-spoken man who seemed more interested in his rose garden than the stock market. When Julian had asked to marry Elena, Carlos had only one condition. You must always respect her intelligence, Mr. Vance. It is her greatest asset. Julian had agreed, of course, all while thinking that her intelligence was a charming, bookish quality with no real-world application. He'd managed her trust fund, a respectable but, to him, unimpressive 8-figure inheritance, folding it into his own accounts where he could make it work for her. She had never once questioned his reports. The jet touched down in Nassau. A black Escalade was waiting on the tarmac. 20 minutes later, he was at the marina. stepping onto the gleaming white deck of the Orion. "Julian!" Chloe launched herself at him. She was all perfume, sun-kissed skin, and energy. She felt, to him, like life. "Hello, darling," he murmured, kissing her deeply. "Did you miss me?" "I miss the man who's taking me to a secret island. Let's go. I want to be offshore before anyone else wakes up." Within the hour, they were cruising on impossibly blue water. The yacht's crew was a skeleton staff he'd used before. They served brunch, lobster, caviar, and endless Krug, as Chloe live-streamed her champagne glass to her thousands of followers, carefully avoiding any shot of Julian or the yacht's identifying markers. "This is it, Julian," she said, stretching out on a sun pad. "This is where we should be, all the time. Not hiding, not with you flying back to her. It's complicated, Chloe. The pregnancy." She sat up, her eyes narrowing. "The pregnancy is a problem, Julian, but it's not a solution for her. What's the plan? You can't be a part-time husband and a part-time, well, this. The plan," he said, sipping his own champagne, "is to enjoy the next 10 days. When I get back, I'm meeting with my lawyers. The prenup is ironclad." She signed it without even reading it. "You're sure?" "Positive. It was a standard agreement. What's mine is mine. What's hers is hers. She gets a stipend, the apartment. She'll be comfortable. She won't fight. It's not in her nature." Chloe smiled, leaning in. "And what about the baby?" "The baby will be a Vance. It will be taken care of. But my life will be with you." He said it and found, to his surprise, that he meant it. Elena was the past. Chloe was the future. Meanwhile, in the New York penthouse, Elena Vance was not arranging flowers. She was in a steel and glass home office that Julian never entered, assuming it was where she balanced her checkbook. She was on a secure video conference with 4 individuals. "The liquidity reports from Vance Capital are confirmed, Mrs. Vance," said a man in London. "He's leveraged 90% of the firm's assets against the A-class shares." "My shares," Elena said quietly. "Yes. The derivative bet he made in Q2 has collapsed. He's been using your holdings, the ones he manages, as collateral to cover the loss. He's been cooking the books, filing fraudulent reports to your personal account. He is, to be blunt, bankrupt. You are the only thing keeping his company afloat." Elena stared at the screen, her face impassive. "And the yacht? The Orion?" "Purchased via a shell corporation," a woman from a forensics accounting firm replied. "Funded by a loan from a bank in the Caymans, with his personal jet, also funded by assets from your trust as collateral." Elena nodded. "Mr. Harrison, is Serafina Key ready?" A silver-haired man on the call, dialed in from a location showing only palm trees, smiled. "We are fully staffed and operational, Madame Sandoval. Your instructions were precise. The Royal Triton Villa is prepared. All island accounts have been flagged." "Good," Elena said. She looked down at the file on her desk. It was a surveillance report. It contained crystal clear, long lens photos of Julian and Chloe Decker boarding the Orion in Nassau 2 hours ago. "My father always said," Elena spoke, her voice calm and clear, "that you should always let a man build his own cage. Julian is very proud of his. I think it's time to show him the lock." She looked at the screen. "He's on schedule. He should be arriving at the atoll in approximately 36 hours. I will be there in 24. "And the other party?" Mr. Harrison asked. "Miss Decker." "She is a guest," Elena said, a flicker of ice in her voice. "She will be treated with all professional courtesy." "Until she is not." She ended the call. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the same view Julian had admired. She placed a hand on her stomach. "Your father," she whispered, "is about to get an education, little one." From a very traditional woman. The Orion dropped anchor 2 miles off the coast of an island that looked like a digital rendering. Serafina Key was a perfect crescent of white sand surrounding a lush green interior, dominated by a single, jungle-covered volcanic peak. There was no harbour. A sleek white motor launch flying the resort's discreet flag, a stylized S, pulled alongside. A man in a crisp white uniform bowed. "Mr. Vance, welcome to Serafina Key. We will handle your luggage. The launch is ready to take you ashore." "This is insane," Chloe breathed, her phone already out. "Julian, it's perfect." Julian felt a swell of pride. He had done this. He had secured this. "Only the best, Chloe." The launch ride was silent, cutting through water so clear it looked like blue glass. As they approached the shore, Julian saw that there was no dock. The launch glided directly into a hidden channel cut into the limestone, disappearing under a canopy of mangroves and arriving in a subterranean grotto that looked like something from a spy film. They were met by the resort's general manager. He was a tall, impeccably dressed man in his 50s, with silver hair and an air of absolute, unflappable authority. "Mr. Vance, Miss Decker, a pleasure. My name is Harrison. I am the general manager of Serafina Key. Welcome to paradise." Harrison. "Good to meet you," Julian said, offering a hand. Harrison shook it firmly. "The place is impressive. I'm keen to meet the owner. I might have a business proposition." Harrison smiled, a polite, thin-lipped expression. "The owner values privacy above all else, Mr. Vance. But I will certainly pass along your request. For now your villa is ready, if you'll follow me." They were transported in a silent, electric cart along pathways that wove through the jungle. There were no other guests visible. "Is the resort empty?" Chloe asked. "We are in our pre-launch phase, miss," Harrison replied. "We are operating at 10% capacity, by invitation only, to ensure our service is flawless for our grand opening." They arrived at the Royal Triton Villa. It was less a building and more a compound. A private infinity pool blurred into the horizon. The walls were open to the sea breeze. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, and bespoke. A bottle of 1996 Dom Perignon was chilling in an ice bucket. "This," Julian said, walking onto the terrace, "is what I'm talking about." For 2 days, it was exactly what he had imagined. They swam, they sunbathed, they ate exquisite food delivered by near-invisible staff. Chloe was ecstatic, documenting every second. Julian was relaxed, his phone turned off, his mind blessedly free of Eleanor and New York. On the 3rd day, Julian decided to use the spa. He and Chloe booked a couple's geothermal treatment. After the massage, as they sipped cucumber-infused water, a young attendant approached with a tablet. "That will be $900, Mr. Vance." Julian laughed. "Just put it on the villa's account." "I'm sorry, sir," the attendant said, her smile unwavering. "All auxiliary services must be settled at the time of use. It is a resort policy." Julian was annoyed. "Fine." He produced his American Express Centurion card. The black titanium card was his badge of honor. The attendant swiped it. Her smile faltered. She swiped it again. "Is there a problem?" Julian asked, his voice sharp. I apologize, sir. The card has been declined." Julian's blood ran cold. "What? That's impossible. Run it again." "I have, sir. 3 times." "It's your machine," Julian snapped, his voice rising. Chloe was watching, her brow furrowed. "That card has no limit. Get your manager." "That won't be necessary, sir." Mr. Harrison appeared, as if summoned from the ether. "There seems to be a network-wide outage with the island's credit processing. 1,000 apologies. It's a temporary issue with the submarine cable. Please, the treatment is on the house for your trouble." Julian, though publicly mollified, was deeply unsettled. A network outage didn't decline a card, it produced an error. Declined meant a lack of funds, or a freeze. He stormed back to the villa, Chloe trailing behind him. "Julian, what was that? It was so embarrassing." "It's nothing. A technical glitch," he barked, grabbing his satellite phone from his bag. He needed to call his bank. Now. He powered it on. The phone searched for a signal, and searched. No satellite connection. "What the hell?" He tried again. Nothing. "The Wi-Fi," he yelled, grabbing his laptop. He opened it. The resort's network, Serafina Guest, was visible. He connected. Full bars. He tried to open his banking portal. "This site cannot be reached." He tried to open Google. "This site cannot be reached." He tried to open the Vance Capital homepage. "This site cannot be reached." The only site that would load was the resort's internal homepage, showing the restaurant menus and spa services. "Julian, you're scaring me," Chloe said. "He's blocking us," Julian whispered, a dreadful paranoia setting in. "Harrison, he's blocking the internet." He strode to the villa's phone and dialed 0 for the front desk. Harrison answered on the first ring. "Mr. Harrison, my internet is down. My sat phone is down. What is going on?" "Ah, Mr. Vance." Harrison's voice was impossibly calm. "I was just about to call you. The network outage is more significant than we thought. It seems to be affecting all communications." "That's unacceptable," Julian roared. "I am running a multi-billion-dollar firm. I need to be in contact." "I understand your frustration, sir. We are working on it. In the meantime, might I offer a consolation? The owner of Serafina Key has just arrived on the island. You mentioned you wished to meet. She has graciously invited you and Miss Decker to join her for dinner this evening. Aperture Restaurant, 8 o'clock. Julian paused. The anger was replaced by a surge of adrenaline. The owner. This was his chance. He could fix this. A man this powerful could sort out the communications, or more likely, this was a power play, a negotiating tactic. "Fine," Julian said, his voice cold. "We will be there." He hung up. "What is it?" Chloe asked. "We're meeting the owner," Julian said, a predatory gleam returning to his eye. "The mysterious owner of this island. Get dressed. Wear the red dress. The one I like." He was going to get to the bottom of this. He would turn this outage to his advantage. He'd offer to invest, to help them fix their infrastructure. He would turn this inconvenience into a deal. He was Julian Vance. This is what he did. He turned problems into profit. The tension of the afternoon bled into the evening. Julian, unable to contact the outside world, felt like an animal in a cage. A very beautiful, very expensive cage. He paced the villa, consumed by the decline. It was a message. He was certain the owner was testing him, flexing. "How do I look?" Chloe emerged from the bedroom. She was a vision in the red, backless dress. It was a statement. She was here to be seen, to conquer. "Perfect," Julian said, his mind only half on her. He straightened his own linen jacket. "Let's go. Don't speak unless I speak to you. Let me handle this." Chloe's face tightened. "Don't treat me like an idiot, Julian. I know how to network." "This isn't networking, Chloe. This is a high-stakes negotiation. Just follow my lead." A private cart arrived at their villa at 7:55 p.m. Precisely. The driver was silent. The short ride to Aperture Restaurant was thick with Julian's nervous energy. The restaurant was built on the island's highest cliff, an open-air marvel of architecture that seemed to hang over the ocean. They were the only patrons. Mr. Harrison was waiting at the entrance. "Mr. Vance, Miss Decker, so glad you could join us. The owner is waiting for you on the private terrace." He led them through the empty restaurant, the sound of the waves crashing far below the only noise. They passed through a beaded curtain onto a stone terrace, lit by a single dramatic fire pit. A person was standing at the edge, looking out at the sea, their back to them. It was a woman. Julian slowed his walk. The woman was wearing a simple, elegant, white linen dress. Her dark hair was tied back. "Madam," Harrison said softly, "your guests have arrived." The woman turned. Julian Vance's world stopped. The air left his lungs. His smile, fixed for a high-powered greeting, froze and shattered. Chloe, a step behind him, let out a small, confused gasp. "Julian? Who is that?" The woman's hands were resting on the swell of her pregnancy. She smiled, a calm, cool smile that did not reach her eyes. "Julian, darling," Elena Vance said. "You made it. I was so worried about your flight to Zurich. You must be exhausted." Julian couldn't speak. He could only stare. This was impossible. This was a nightmare. "Elena?" he finally choked out. What are you? How did I get here?" she finished for him. "My G650 is much faster than your yacht, Julian, and I own the airfield. We don't have to file public flight plans." Chloe stepped forward, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Julian, what is this? Who is this? Is this your wife?" "Miss Decker, isn't it?" Elena's gaze shifted to Chloe, and it was as if she were examining an insect. "Chloe Decker, 24, junior analyst at Vance Capital, grew up in Ohio. You prefer Krug to Dom, you have 14,000 followers on Instagram, and you have a regrettable tattoo of a butterfly on your lower back. Am I missing anything?" Chloe went pale. "How do you know that?" "I know it," Elena said, turning her icy gaze back to her husband. "Because I know everything, Julian. Please, sit. We have so much to discuss." Julian's body moved, but his mind was still fractured. He stumbled into a chair. Chloe remained standing, vibrating with shock. "Sit down, Miss Decker," Mr. Harrison said, his voice no longer polite but firm. She sat. "A drink?" Elena offered. "I'll have my usual. Mr. Harrison, please bring our guests, whatever they're drinking. Oh, wait, that's right." She looked at Julian. "You can't pay for it." "What is this, Elena?" Julian snarled, finding his voice. "It's a trick. Some hormonal, pregnant game? How did you find me?" "Find you?" Elena laughed. It was a sound he'd never heard before, a cold, sharp sound. "Julian, I didn't find you. I invited you. The impossible reservation. The discreet holding company you wired the money to. That's my private family office. You paid me for the privilege of bringing your mistress to my home." Julian's brain short-circuited. "Your home?" "Serafina Key," Elena said, gesturing to the ocean around them, "is the flagship property of the Sandoval Hospitality Group. My group. The one I inherited from my father, the quiet academic you dismissed. The man you thought was just a retired professor was, in fact, the founder of one of the largest private hospitality empires in the world. An empire I have been running since his death. An empire I have been growing." She leaned forward. "You thought I was organizing charity luncheons? I was chairing board meetings. You thought I was balancing a checkbook? I was managing a global portfolio. You thought my little trust fund was just pocket money? Julian, my little trust fund is Vance Capital Partners." The blood drained from his face. "What? What did you say?" "I'd say this is where the main course arrives," Elena said, as Mr. Harrison placed a single, leather-bound folder in front of her. "This is going to be painful." "You're lying," Julian whispered. But the denial was weak. The blood was pounding in his ears. The declined Centurion card. The network outage. It was all clicking into place with a horrifying, sickening precision. Am I? Elena opened the folder. Let's review. 18 months ago, you made a catastrophic, leveraged bet on Argentine derivatives. You lost, let me see, $2.3 billion in a single quarter. Vance Capital was insolvent. You were days from a margin call that would have exposed you, bankrupted you, and likely sent you to prison for fraud. Julian was shaking his head, a mute, desperate gesture. But then, Elena continued, a miracle. An anonymous European investor swept in, acquiring a 49% non-voting stake in your firm, providing the exact liquidity you needed to cover the loss. You never questioned it. Your ego was so large, you just assumed the universe provides for men like you. She slid a document across the table. A signature page. That anonymous investor was me, Julian. I've been propping up your entire company. That salary you draw, it's my money. The penthouse, mortgaged to my holding company. The Gulf Stream, the yacht, all leveraged against assets that I, not you, control. You haven't had any money for almost 2 years. You've just been playing with my checkbook. Julian looked at Chloe. She was staring at Eleanor, her mouth open, her face a pale, terrified green. But why? Julian finally managed. Why do this? At first, I did it to protect the family name, to protect our child from the humiliation of your failure. I hoped, you would learn from it, that you would correct your course. Eleanor's voice was steady. But you didn't. You just became more arrogant. And then 6 months ago, you became sloppy. She slid a second set of papers across the table. These were not financial reports. They were photographs. Julian, kissing Chloe in the elevator of her apartment building. Julian, handing her a key. Julian at a jewelry store, buying a diamond bracelet he'd told Elena was a corporate gift for a client. You spied on me? I conducted due diligence on my failing assets, Julian. You were the biggest one. And when I discovered your infidelity, well, the plan changed. Chloe finally found her voice. It was high and shaking. He lied to me. He told me you were nothing. He said you were just a wife. I am his wife, Miss Decker, Elena said. And as his wife, I am entitled to certain things. Which brings us to the document you had me sign, Julian. She pulled out a final paper. The prenuptial agreement. You were so proud of this, Elena said. You had your sharks at Sullivan and Cromwell draft it. What's mine is mine. What's hers is hers. You thought you were protecting your future billions from my faded old money. You didn't even read the amendments my lawyers made. You just saw the main clause and signed. My lawyers vetted it. Your lawyers vetted the version you showed them. Not the final one you signed on our wedding day. You were too busy accepting congratulations. But my change was very small. I just added one clause. A mutual one, of course. A simple morality clause. She tapped the page. Section 8, subsection A. In the event of documented marital infidelity on the part of either party, all assets, shared or individual, managed jointly or separately, shall be immediately forfeit to the non-offending party. You insisted on it, actually. You were so terrified I might step out and try to take your empire. But it turns out, Julian, you were the one who broke it. Julian stared at the text. It was there, in black and white. As of 8:04 p.m. This evening, Eleanor announced, I invoked that clause. My legal team, in conjunction with the board of, my company, has voted to remove you as CEO of Vance Capital Partners, effective immediately. All your corporate accounts are frozen. Your personal accounts, which are funded by those corporate accounts, are also frozen. The Centurion card was declined not because of a network error, Julian. It was declined because you have a zero balance. You have, quite literally, nothing. The silence on the terrace was absolute, broken only by the waves. Julian looked like he had been struck by lightning. He was a shell. Chloe was the first to react. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly. She looked at Julian with pure, unadulterated hatred. You idiot! You ruined me! You brought me into this! You have nothing?" "Miss Decker," Julian whispered. "Chloe, wait." "Don't touch me!" she shrieked. She turned to Eleanor, her eyes wide with panic, attempting a new strategy. "Mrs. Vance." "Eleanor, you have to believe me. I had no idea. He tricked me. He told me you were separated. He said you were unwell. He used me. You're a woman, you must understand. It's his fault." Elena watched the performance without a flicker of emotion. She sipped her water. "Mr. Harrison," Elena said, her voice bored. Harrison stepped forward. Two large, formidable-looking men in quiet, professional-looking security attire stepped out of the shadows. "Miss Decker," Harrison said, "your vacation at Serafina Quay is, unfortunately, over. We have already packed your belongings from the villa." "What? No, you can't." Chloe backed away. "Julian, do something." Julian didn't move. He was paralyzed. "There is a ferry to the mainland in Belize that leaves in 1 hour," Harrison continued. "A car will be waiting to take you to the public terminal." "A ferry?" Chloe's voice cracked. "A public ferry. I came on a yacht." "The Orion has been seized, miss," Harrison said flatly. "It is now the property of Sandoval Hospitality, pending liquidation. These gentlemen will escort you to the dock. Please do not make a scene. Our other guests value their privacy." "Other guests?" I thought we were the only ones." "We are at 10% capacity," Elena said, finally looking at her. "You just weren't invited to the same parties, Miss Decker. Goodbye." The security men took Chloe's arms. She didn't fight. The fire just went out of her. She looked, suddenly, exactly like what she was. A 24-year-old who had made a very, very bad bet. She allowed them to lead her away, her sobs lost in the sound of the ocean. The terrace was silent again. The fire pit crackled. Julian was still staring at the prenup, his knuckles white. "Elena," he said, his voice a low, strangled rasp. "You can't. The baby. Our baby. You wouldn't do this to the father of your child." Elena's face, which had been marble, finally hardened into something new. Something he had never seen. Fury. "The baby," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You dare to speak his name. You, who were on a yacht with another woman while I was at a hospital." "What? What hospital?" "2 days ago, the day you left for Zurich. I had a scare. Some bleeding. Dr. Matthews was worried. I spent 8 hours in an examination room, alone, terrified I was losing our son. And where were you? You were drinking champagne with her. Your phone was off. You were inaccessible." I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know." She slammed her hand on the table. The water glasses jumped. "You didn't care about me. You didn't care about this baby. You only cared about yourself." "This baby," she said, placing both hands on her stomach, "is a Sandoval. He will not be raised by a liar, a fraud, and a failure." "I am not a failure," Julian roared, finally finding his feet. He stood, knocking his chair over. "I built that firm. Me! My name is on the door." "Your name is on a door I paid for," Elena shot back, standing as well. She was magnificent in her anger. "You built nothing. You were a gambler who lost. I was the house, And the house, Julian, always wins. He tried a new tactic, pleading. He moved around the table, his hands outstretched. Elena. My love. Please, it was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless diversion. She meant nothing to me. You know that. It's you I love, you and the baby. We can fix this. He reached to touch her arm. Don't, she commanded, and he froze. Don't you ever touch me again. I'll do anything, he begged, his voice breaking. He was crying, real tears of terror. I'll go to therapy. I'll resign. You can run the company. Just don't do this. Don't leave me with nothing. You're my wife. You're supposed to stand by me. I stood by you when you were committing fraud, Julian. I stood by you when you were lying to me every day. I stood by you when I was alone in that doctor's office. I am done standing. Now I am moving. This is illegal, he tried. One last, desperate bluff. You can't seize my assets without a court. I'll fight this. I'll take you to every court in New York. You will? Elena smiled. With what money? You have no lawyer. You have no funds. You are, as of this moment, a man with a single suit and a very expensive, non-functional watch. And if you do find a lawyer to take your case pro bono, I will countersue. I will release the reports from my forensics team, the ones detailing your wire fraud, the ones that will send you to a federal prison for the next 20 years. So you have a choice. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the faint, expensive scent of her perfume. You can take the ferry with Miss Decker, she said, or you can try to fight me. And I will not only take your money and your freedom, I will take your name. I will make sure our son never knows who his father was. Your choice. Julian stared at her. This was not the Elena he knew. This was not the quiet, demure woman who discussed literature. This was a stranger. This was a queen, and he was a peasant at her feet. He knew, in that moment, that he had lost. He had lost everything. He deflated. The fight, the anger, the arrogance. It all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, terrified man. What do I do? He whispered. You leave. Mr. Harrison stepped forward. He was holding a small, clear plastic bag. Inside was a simple ferry ticket and a few $100s in cash. Mr. Harrison will show you to the service dock, Elena said, turning her back on him. She walked back to the edge of the terrace, looking out at the sea. Elena, please. Mr. Vance, Harrison said, his voice polite once more. This way, please. Julian looked at his wife's back. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. It was as if he had already ceased to exist. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken, Julian Vance followed Mr. Harrison out of the restaurant, leaving his wife alone on the terrace of the island she owned. A month passed. The Caribbean sun was just as bright, the water just as turquoise. Serafina Key was preparing for its grand opening. Elena Vance, no, she was Elena Sandoval now, having already filed the paperwork, sat on the terrace of her personal villa, not the Royal Triton. That one was being spiritually cleansed, as Mr. Harrison had put it. She was on a conference call, but this time it wasn't about collapsing firms. And the board of the Sandoval Foundation has approved the new initiative, a voice said from her laptop. The Vance Capital Liquidation Fund will be redirected to establish 3 new shelters for women and children in the New York area. The penthouse has been sold, and the funds are already in escrow. Excellent, Elena said, rubbing her now very prominent belly. And the Orion? The yacht was sold at auction in Monaco last week, Mr. Harrison reported, sitting opposite her with his own tablet. The proceeds will fully fund the Foundation's operations for the next decade. Good. See that it's done. She closed the laptop. The quiet of the island settled around her. It was peaceful. "A package arrived for you, Madame Sandoval," Mr. Harrison said, placing a small, battered cardboard box on the table. "It has no return address, but the postmark is from Belize." Elena looked at it. She knew who it was from. "Open it, please." Harrison sliced the tape with a letter opener. Inside, resting on crumpled newspaper, was a Patek Philippe watch, Julian's watch. There was also a single piece of paper, a greasy sheet torn from a notepad. In messy, desperate handwriting, it said, "I need food. Please. I'll do anything." J. Elena stared at the watch, the symbol of his power, the thing he'd flashed at her 1,000 times. Now it was just a piece of metal, traded for a ferry ticket and a month of desperation. "What are your instructions, madam?" Harrison asked. Elena pushed the box away. "Return to sender," she said. "We don't accept unsolicited donations." "Very good, madam." He took the box and disappeared. Elena stood and walked to the edge of her pool. She looked out at the horizon, a perfect, unbroken line of blue. She thought of Julian, and for the first time, she felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just quiet. She had spent years hiding her strength, believing it was her duty as a wife to be a partner, to be supportive. To be less so, he could be more. She had let him build a gilded cage for her, not realizing she had always held the key. His betrayal had been a terrible gift. It had shattered the cage and forced her to remember who she was. She was not Elena Vance, the quiet wife. She was Elena Sandoval, the daughter of a visionary, the head of an empire, and the mother of a son. The baby kicked, a strong, sudden movement. Elena smiled, placing a hand on her stomach. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered to the sea breeze. "It's just us now, and we own the entire view." The package landed on the warped wooden table of his rented room with a dull, final thud. Julian tore it open, his hand shaking from a combination of humidity, hunger, and a desperate flickering hope. Maybe she had relented. Maybe it was a plane ticket. Maybe it was a letter. It was the Patek Philippe. He stared at it. She hadn't even kept it. She hadn't sold it. She had returned it. The gesture was more brutal than any verbal insult. It was a statement of complete and utter irrelevance. The watch, his $150,000 badge of honor, was just an object she didn't want in her house. Julian sank onto the lumpy cot, the springs groaning in the suffocating Belize city heat. It had been 6 weeks. 6 weeks since he'd been escorted off Serafina Key with $500 and a ferry ticket. 6 weeks of a living nightmare. His suit, the last remnant of his old life, was a wrinkled, sweat-stained ruin. The $500 was long gone, spent on this squalid room and whatever food he could buy from street stalls. He was no longer Julian Vance, titan of finance. He was just a ghost, haunted by a life that no longer existed. He needed money. He needed a way out. The watch was his only option. He found a pawn shop on a dusty back street, the sign half broken. The proprietor, a man with a lazy eye and a shirt unbuttoned to his navel, chewed on a toothpick as Julian entered. "I need to sell this," Julian said, his voice hoarse. He tried to inject his old authority into it, but it came out sounding like a plea. He laid the watch on the glass counter. The man, Silas, picked it up. He hefted it. He peered at the face, then at the movement through a jeweler's loop. He was silent for a long, agonizing minute. "It's a Patek Philippe," Julian said, his voice cracking. It's worth over $100,000. I'll take 50,000, cash." Silas set the watch down and laughed, a dry, rattling sound. 50,000. Sure, Hefe. And I'm the King of England. It's real. Look at the serial numbers. Oh, I know it's real, Silas said, leaning in. His breath smelled of stale rum. It's a very beautiful watch. A watch like that belongs to a very rich man. A man with a yacht, maybe. A private jet. A man who does not look, he gestured at Julian's entire pathetic appearance, like you. I lost my wallet. My boat sank. Spare me the story. I see men like you every day. You stole it. From a tourist. From a house. Silas pushed the watch back toward him. Get out. I don't buy stolen goods this hot. Not unless the price is right. I didn't steal it, Julian screamed, slamming his fist on the counter. It's mine. Silas's smile vanished. He reached under the counter and produced a heavy, rusted machete, laying it flat between them. The price, he said quietly, is $500 American. You take it, or you take your watch and you leave. And if you yell at me again, I will take the watch and your hand. Julian stared at the blade, then at the watch, his symbol of power, his last connection to the man he was. He thought of the hunger clawing at his stomach, the rent he couldn't pay. He was defeated. 500, he whispered. Silas grinned, sweeping the Patek into a drawer. He counted out a small, dirty stack of bills. Julian snatched them and fled the shop, the man's laughter following him into the street. With the cash, he bought a cheap meal and went to an internet cafe. He needed to know. He needed to see what had happened to his world. He paid for an hour and typed in his own name. The screen flooded with results. Vance Capital dissolved. Wall Street. Titan Julian Vance disappears amid fraud allegations. The mysterious Elena Sandoval, the woman who took down an empire. He clicked, his blood running cold. The articles painted him as a villain, a reckless gambler who had defrauded investors. Then they painted Elena as a saint. The Sandoval Hospitality Group had, in a stunning act of philanthropy, absorbed all of Vance Capital's toxic assets and, instead of liquidating, had funneled them into a new foundation, the Sandoval Legacy Foundation, dedicated to funding women's shelters and providing legal aid to victims of financial fraud. His company, his name, his entire life's work, was now a charity. She hadn't just taken it. She had repurposed it. She had erased him and replaced him with an act of benevolence. He scrolled, finding a picture of her. It was from a week ago, at a press conference. She was standing in front of the New York Public Library, radiant, her pregnancy pronounced. She was smiling, holding a symbolic check. The headline read, Elena Sandoval pledges Vance assets to rebuild lives. He wasn't just broke. He wasn't just exiled. He had been rewritten. He was the dragon she had slain to build her new castle. He walked out of the internet cafe, stumbling into the bright, indifferent sun. The $500 in his pocket felt like lead. It wasn't enough to get home. It wasn't enough to restart. It was just enough to survive for another few weeks, to prolong the agony. He was a ghost in a foreign land, and the woman who had banished him was being celebrated as a hero. 2 months later, the first snow of the season was dusting the grounds of the Sandoval family estate in upstate New York. The Manhattan penthouse, with its cold glass and sterile views, had been sold. Its contents were auctioned, the proceeds added to the foundation. Elena Sandoval sat in a wing-back chair in a room filled with morning light. This was her father's library, a room of warm wood, old books, and quiet strength. The nursery down the hall was ready. It was painted a soft, gentle cream, with classic, handcrafted wooden furniture. It was a room built for a legacy, not for show. Mr. Harrison entered, holding a leather satchel. "Good morning, Madame Sandoval. I have the last of the papers." "Is it done?" she asked. "It is. The divorce was finalized in a closed hearing this morning. The New York court cited the morality clause and your husband's abandonment. You are, in the eyes of the law, fully and completely unbound." He placed a document in front of her. She signed Elena Sandoval on the final line. It was over. As she set the pen down, she drew a sharp, sudden breath. A powerful contraction seized her. She looked at Harrison, a small, calm smile touching her lips. "It seems," she said, "he's ready." The birth was nothing like the terror-filled hospital visit months before. It was calm, private, and powerful. She was surrounded by the best medical team her money could buy in a secure wing she had endowed. After 8 hours, her son was placed in her arms. He was perfect. He had her dark eyes and a full head of black hair. He looked at her, his tiny, unfocused gaze seeming to search her face. All the anger, the ice, the calculated revenge that had driven her for the past year melted away. It was replaced by a fierce, lioness-like protection she had never known. Mr. Harrison was permitted to enter the room. He held a file. "The birth certificate, madam." A nurse approached gently. "And the father's name, dear?" Elena looked at her son. She thought of Julian, a brief, cold flash of a man on a terrace, screaming about his name. She thought of his watch, an empty, meaningless trinket she had sent back into the void. He was not a father. He was a mistake. Then she thought of her own father, Carlos Sandoval, the man who had taught her that true strength was quiet, that intelligence was the sharpest weapon, and that respect was the only currency that mattered. She looked at the nurse, her voice clear and strong. "There is no father to be listed." She took the pen and turned to the document. On the line for "name of child," she wrote, in firm, elegant script, 2 words: Matteo Sandoval. She had taken her company. She had taken her freedom. And now she had secured her future. The Vance name was not just defeated, it was erased, replaced by a new legacy, one that would be built on truth, strength, and her name alone. She held her son close, looking out the window at the snow-covered grounds of her home. It was a new world, and it was all hers. And that's the story of how a man who thought he owned the world learned he was just a guest in his wife's. Julian's arrogance was his downfall, but Elena's quiet strength was her salvation. She proved that the person you underestimate is often the one holding all the cards. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in the noise you make, but in the silent, unshakable foundation you build. What did you think of Eleanor's ultimate revenge? Was it too harsh, or was it exactly what Julian deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story of drama, twists, and sweet justice, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who loves a good story, and most importantly, clicking subscribe and turning on notifications so you never miss another upload. We have new stories coming every week. This is your storyteller, signing off. He was a man who had everything: a corner office on the 50th floor, a tailored suit worth more than most cars, and a ruthless ambition that had scorched everyone beneath him. His secretary Clara was just another rung on his ladder, diligent, intelligent, and inconveniently pregnant. When his ambitious mistress, Serafina, wanted Clara gone, he did it without a second thought. He fired her, publicly, humiliatingly. What he didn't know, as he watched her walk away, was that Clara wasn't just his secretary. She was Clara Hayes, the only daughter of the man who owned the entire building, and the reckoning was just beginning. Julian Vance lived his life 50 floors above New York City, and he believed this altitude granted him a kind of divinity. His office at Vanguard Equity Partners wasn't just a room, it was a testament to his arrival. It was a cube of glass suspended over the city, and from it he viewed the world and his employees as tiny, manageable subjects. Julian was a man carved from ambition. At 38, he was the youngest senior vice president in the firm's history, and he wore his success like armor. Bespoke Tom Ford suits, a Patek Philippe watch that chimed on the quarter hour, and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. Outside that glass cube sat Clara Hayes. Clara was, in every way, the antithesis of Julian's flash. She was quiet, methodical, and possessed an intelligence that was as deep as it was unobtrusive. For 2 years, she had been the perfect secretary. She anticipated his needs, corrected his mistakes before he made them, and managed his chaotic schedule with an unnerving calm. She was, as Julian often bragged to his peers, a mind reader. But 6 months ago, Clara had become an inconvenience. She was pregnant. Her body, once neatly professional, was now undeniably round. Her presence, once efficient, now seemed to Julian to be a constant, ticking reminder of biological messiness. He loathed it. It wasn't just the impending maternity leave, a scheduling black hole, he'd called it. It was the visual of it. It screamed weakness. It screamed domesticity. It screamed everything Julian had sacrificed to get where he was. "Clara!" he barked through the intercom, not looking up from his terminal. "My 10 a.m. client notes. Now." "They're on your desk, Julian," her calm voice replied instantly. "I placed them there an hour ago. Open to page 3, where you'll find the discrepancies in their Q3 report." Julian glanced down. There they were. He grunted, annoyed at her preemptive competence. His annoyance was being actively stoked by Serafina Croft. Serafina was the firm's new head of strategic marketing, hired 3 months prior. She was fire to Clara's ice, all sharp angles, blood-red lipstick, and a laugh that echoed with undisguised avarice. She and Julian had fallen into a discreet, then flagrant affair almost immediately. Serafina didn't just want Julian's affection, she wanted his power, and she saw Clara as a stubborn obstacle. Serafina sauntered over to Clara's desk, leaning against it hip first, deliberately crowding Clara's space. She was holding a steaming mug. "Still here, Clara?" Serafina purred, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "I'm surprised you can still fit behind that desk. You're blooming." Clara didn't look up from her screen. "I'm fine, Miss Croft. Can I help you with something?" "Oh, just admiring your dedication," Serafina said, taking a sip. "Julian is so kind to let you keep working. Most women in your condition would be at home, nesting or something." A few junior analysts snickered. Clara's fingers paused on the keyboard. Beside her, Mary, the older executive assistant for another partner, shot Serafina a venomous look. Mary liked Clara. She'd seen ambitious sharks like Serafina devour good people for sport. "I'm more effective here, Miss Croft," Clara said evenly. "Are you, though?" Serafina shot back. Julian was just complaining that the Sanderson files were late. "Pregnancy brain, I suppose?" Clara's head snapped up. "The Sanderson files are not due until tomorrow at 5. Julian wanted them today. He must have forgotten to tell you," Serafina said, with a fake pout. "Don't worry, I handled it for him." Clara watched her walk away, a perfectly straight seam running up the back of her designer skirt. Clara looked at her digital scheduler. The Sanderson deadline was, indeed, tomorrow. Serafina was lying. She was building a narrative. This wasn't the first time. For weeks, Serafina had been helpfully pointing out Clara's lapses. A meeting missed that had been rescheduled by Serafina herself, a coffee order that was wrong, though Julian had changed his preference that morning. Small, insidious cuts designed to bleed Clara's reputation dry. And Julian, blinded by Serafina's ambition and his own, was letting it happen. Later that day, Julian had a crisis. A major client, the pension fund for the state of Ohio, was threatening to pull their $800 million portfolio. Their representative was on a conference call, and he was furious. "I'm looking at this proposal, Vance, and it's a joke," the man yelled through the speakerphone. "You've miscalculated our exposure by nearly 15%. This is amateur hour." Julian was sweating. He was shuffling papers, his charm failing. "Mr. Henderson, if you'll just let me explain." Clara, listening from her desk, quietly printed a single sheet of paper. She walked into the glass office, ignoring Serafina, who had perched herself on the guest chair, and slid the paper in front of Julian. On it were 3 bullet points. Julian paused. He read them. His posture changed. "Mr. Henderson," Julian said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk. "I haven't miscalculated. You're looking at the projections before we factored in the new federal bond acquisitions. If you'll turn to Appendix D, subsection 4A, which my team prepared this morning, you'll see we've actually shielded your exposure. The 15% discrepancy isn't a loss. It's a hedge that's already paying dividends." There was a silence on the line. "Well, why didn't you say so?" "I prefer to let the numbers speak for themselves," Julian said, leaning back. He won the call. The client was pacified. When he hung up, Serafina ran a hand up his arm. "You were brilliant, Julian. You saved us." Julian straightened his tie, his gaze falling on Clara, who was quietly retrieving the paper. "Clara, get the Henderson contingency file updated, and next time, try to keep up." Clara paused at the door, her back to him. "Of course, Julian." She walked out. Julian didn't see the look on her face, but Mary at the next desk did. It wasn't defeat, it wasn't sadness, it was a cold, calculating patience. It was the look of a chess master watching her opponent knowingly walk into a trap. The trap was being set, but not by Clara. It was being set by Julian and Serafina over $300 stakes at the Onyx Room, a restaurant so dark and exclusive it felt like a vault. "She has to go, Julian," Serafina said, swirling a glass of Cabernet. The crimson liquid caught the light from the single candle. "She makes you look soft." Julian loosened his tie, away from the fluorescent lights of the office. His ambition felt purer, more justified. "She's pregnant, Sarah. Firing her is a legal nightmare. The optics are terrible." "Optics?" Serafina laughed, a low, throaty sound. "We're not talking about optics. We're talking about your future. The partnership. The Asia-Pacific expansion. Do you think David Morrison got to be CEO by worrying about optics? He got there by being decisive, by cutting liabilities." She leaned in, her voice dropping. "And she is a liability. She's slow, she's dowdy, and she's watching us. I don't like it." Julian frowned. "She's a secretary. She's not watching anything." "Isn't she?" Serafina countered. "She saved you on that Henderson call. How did she know that? How was she that prepared? It's like she's auditing you. It's creepy, Julian. And frankly, I want her desk. I want to be right outside your office. I can be your partner in this, Julian. Your real partner. But not while she's there, playing Mother Superior." The image she painted was potent. Serafina, in her sharp suits, sitting guard at his door. Serafina, anticipating his real needs. It was an intoxicating thought. The pregnancy had repulsed him, but Serafina was right. Clara's quiet competence was, in its own way, a threat. It felt like judgment. "Fine," Julian said, his voice hardening. "We cut the liability, but it has to be clean. It has to be for cause." "Then we find a cause," Serafina smiled, raising her glass. The cause began the next day. It was a two-pronged attack: manufacture a performance issue and sabotage her reliability. The first step was a file. The North Star acquisition was Julian's flagship project, a $2 billion deal. The final signatory papers were due by courier to London by 10 a.m. Friday. This was a hard deadline. Missing it would incur massive penalties. Clara had the package prepped by Wednesday. She logged it for international courier pickup, triple-checked the customs forms, and placed the bright red, wax-sealed envelope in the secure outgoing mail slot. She sent a confirmation email to Julian. "North Star package is secure and logged for 8 a.m. pickup tomorrow, Thursday. It will arrive in London with 24 hours to spare." Julian read the email. Serafina was leaning over his shoulder. "See?" he whispered. "She's on top of it." "It's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Serafina whispered back. She waited until 5:30 p.m., when Clara, moving a little slower than usual, packed her bag and headed for the elevator. Clara was the last to leave their section. Mary, the other assistant, had left hours ago. At 5:35 p.m., Serafina walked calmly to the mailroom. She flirted with the night shift clerk, asked him to find a lost earring near the sorting table. While he was distracted, her hand darted into the International Secure slot. She retrieved the bright red envelope. She didn't destroy it. She simply slipped it into her oversized designer handbag. At 7 p.m., she and Julian were in his office. He was pacing. "This is insane, Sarah. This is a felony." "It's a clerical error, Julian," she cooed, placing the envelope on his desk. "Clara's error. She must have forgotten to put it in the slot. Look, here it is, sitting on her desk, buried under a memo. She must have left it this afternoon. How tragic. How forgetful." She then moved to Clara's computer. Clara, trusting, had her password saved in a desktop file for Julian, in case of emergency. This, Serafina decided, was an emergency. She logged into Clara's email. She found the confirmation message sent to Julian. "North Star package is secure and logged." Serafina smiled, and with a click of the mouse, she deleted it. Not just from Clara's sent folder, but from the server-side recall. Then, she went into Clara's scheduler and deleted the courier pickup appointment. "There," she said, logging out. "No email, no appointment, just a package sitting on her desk. Missed. A multi-billion-dollar deal, jeopardized by her incompetence. By her pregnancy brain." Julian stared at the package. This was the point of no return. This wasn't just firing someone. It was destroying them. He picked up the package. He opened Clara's desk drawer, the one with her spare sweaters and prenatal vitamins, and dropped the package inside, kicking it to the very back. "It's done," he said, his voice hollow. "Good," Serafina said, kissing him hard. "Now tomorrow, we'll be in the Chicago office. We'll be unreachable. By the time anyone realizes the package never left, it will be Friday morning. It will be too late, and it will be entirely her fault." They left the office, partners in crime. Back in the darkness, the green light on Clara's computer terminal blinked off, but across the hall, a small red light on a ceiling-mounted security camera, the one Julian always assumed was just for show, remained on. It had captured Serafina's 5:35 p.m. visit to the mailroom. It had captured her logging into Clara's computer. It had captured everything. Friday morning was electric with panic. The first call came at 9 a.m., London time, which was 4 a.m. in New York. Julian, asleep in his high-rise apartment, ignored it. The second came at 5 a.m. from his boss, David Morrison. Julian answered that one. Vance, where in God's name is the North Star package? Morrison bellowed, his voice cracking with transatlantic static. Our London team is sitting here with the board, and the documents are not here. The 10 a.m. deadline is in 1 hour. Julian feigned groggy confusion. What? That's impossible. Clara confirmed it was sent. Well, it wasn't, Morrison roared. You fix this, Vance. You fix this now, or your partnership is dead. The line clicked. Julian was wide awake. He frantically called the office. Clara, who always arrived at 7 a.m., picked up. Clara, where is the North Star package? Julian yelled, genuine panic now mixing with his manufactured rage. It's... What? Clara's voice was instantly alert. Julian, it's in London. I sent it Wednesday for Thursday pickup. It's not in London. The courier company has no record of a pickup. Did you log it? Yes, of course, I logged it. I emailed you the confirmation. Clara was typing furiously. Julian, the email. It's gone. The scheduler appointment. It's not here. What do you mean it's not there? Julian spat. Did you forget? Clara, did you forget to send the most important package of my career? No, Clara was stunned. She was searching her desk, her mind racing. I don't understand. Find it, Clara. Find it, or you are finished. Julian hung up. He showered, shaved, and dressed with methodical care. He put on his most expensive suit. Today was a day for an execution. He arrived at the office at 9 a.m. sharp. The floor was a morgue. Everyone knew. The North Star deal was dead. The firm would face millions in penalties, but worse, the reputational damage was catastrophic. Clara was pale, standing by her desk, her hands resting on her stomach. She looked defeated. My office, Clara. Now, Julian said, his voice devoid of all warmth. Serafina was already inside, sitting in the guest chair, examining her nails. She looked up as Clara entered, a mask of false sympathy on her face. Clara, I'm so sorry. This is just a tragedy. Julian, I don't know what happened, Clara began, her voice shaking but firm. I took that package to the mailroom myself. I logged it. I emailed you. Someone. Julian cut her off, his voice dangerously low. Or something? Like pregnancy brain, Clara? Is that the something? Clara recoiled as if struck. How dare you? I dare, Julian said, stepping closer. Because I trusted you. I looked like a fool this morning. This firm is now exposed to litigation and ruin, all because my mind-reader secretary was too busy picking out nursery colors to do her one simple job. That is not true, Clara said, her voice rising. I have never missed a deadline. I have never failed you. This is a mistake. This is wrong. It's a failure, Clara. A catastrophic failure, Julian said. He leaned on his desk, the picture of a disappointed, betrayed leader. Serafina was the one who found the package. Go on, Sarah, tell her. Serafina looked up, her eyes wide with mock sadness. Clara, I found it this morning, in your desk drawer, under a pile of baby magazines. This was a lie too far, a vicious, unnecessary embellishment. What? Clara whispered. She physically staggered back. No, I would never. Someone put it there. Who, Clara? Julian laughed, a cold, barking sound. The mailroom gnome? Serafina? Me? Do you hear how paranoid you sound? You're hormonal, you're forgetful, and you just cost this company its biggest deal of the decade. He circled his desk and stood over her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. I can't have unreliable people on my team, he said. The partnership is expanding. We're moving into Asia. I need sharks. Clara, not... This. He gestured vaguely at her stomach. Clara's eyes, which had been wide with shock, suddenly narrowed. The fear vanished, replaced by that same cold, calculating calm Mary had seen before. "Julian," she said, her voice quiet, "you are making a terrible mistake." "No," he said. "My mistake was not doing this months ago. You're fired, Clara, effective immediately." "Julian, you can't," Serafina said, playing her part. "I can and I am," Julian snapped. "Performance. Gross negligence. I have more than cause. Security is on their way up." The entire office was watching through the glass walls. They could hear the raised voices. Mary had her hand over her mouth. "You're firing me," Clara stated, not a question. "Because of a package you know I sent. You're firing me, 6 months pregnant, to give my desk to your mistress." The air left the room. Julian's face went from angry to purple. Serafina shot to her feet. "How dare you!" Serafina shrieked. "Shut up, Serafina," Clara said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. She never broke eye contact with Julian. "You will regret this, Julian Vance. You will regret this more than any other decision in your short, pathetic life." "Get her out," Julian choked out, pressing the security button on his phone. 2 uniformed guards arrived. "Mr. Vance?" "Ms. Hayes is no longer an employee. Please escort her from the building." The guards looked uncomfortable. Escorting a visibly pregnant woman out was a new low. "Ma'am, if you'll come with us." Clara didn't look at them. She looked only at Julian. She let the silence stretch, imprinting his furious, triumphant face into her memory. Then she turned, with all the dignity she could muster, and walked out of the glass office. The guards followed. Someone had already brought a cardboard box to her desk. She didn't have much. A framed photo, a coffee mug, a small plant. Mary rushed over, tears in her eyes. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I know you didn't." "It's all right, Mary," Clara said, her voice soft now. "It's not your fault." She placed her few items in the box. As she did, her sleeve rode up, revealing a simple, elegant watch. It wasn't a Rolex or a Patek. It was a vintage Cartier, understated, but worth more than Julian's entire collection. No one noticed. She picked up the box. The entire floor was silent, watching her walk of shame to the elevators. Serafina was standing in the doorway of Julian's office, a triumphant smirk on her face. Clara passed her and paused. "You know," Clara whispered, just for Serafina. "The camera in the 50th floor hallway. It has a surprisingly clear view of the mailroom. You should really fix your hair before you commit a felony next time." Serafina's face turned to chalk. Clara smiled just once and walked to the elevator. The doors opened. She stepped inside, box in hand, and as the door slid shut, she allowed herself one single shaky breath. Then she pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her husband. She hit a number on her speed dial. "Dad," she said, as the elevator began its descent. "It's done. He did it. He fired me." A deep, kind voice rumbled on the other end. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Dad. But Vanguard Equity is not. The rot is worse than we thought." "I'll be there in an hour," the voice said. "It's time I came out of retirement." Clara didn't live in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment. She lived in a sprawling, 5-story brownstone on the Upper East Side, a fortress of old money and quiet elegance. The doorman, a kind man named Patrick, who had known her since she was a girl, rushed to take her box. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his face creased with worry. "You're home early. Is everything all right?" "Everything is precisely as it should be, Patrick," Clara said, managing a smile. "Is my father here?" "Mr. Hayes is in the library, Mum. He's been waiting for you." She walked past the soaring ceilings and the original Rothko paintings in the foyer, her heels clicking on the marble. She entered the library, a room panelled in dark mahogany and smelling of old books and leather. Harrison Hayes stood by the window, looking out over the private garden. He was a man in his late 60s, but he radiated an energy that shamed men half his age. He wasn't tall, but he was broad, with a full head of white hair and eyes so blue they seemed to bore through steel. This was the man who had built Vanguard Equity Partners from nothing, a legendary, almost mythical figure on Wall Street. The press called him the Architect. For the last 5 years he had been happily retired, leaving the day-to-day to his hand-picked successor, David Morrison. He turned as she entered. "Clara." He enveloped her in a hug, his hand going to her belly. "And how is my grandchild?" "He's kicking," Clara smiled, leaning into him. "He's as indignant as I am." "He has my blood, after all," Harrison chuckled. He led her to a deep leather armchair and poured her a glass of water. "Tell me everything. From the top." Clara recounted the entire sordid affair. The Henderson call, the missed package, the lies, Serafina, the public humiliation. Harrison listened, his face impassive. He was a man who listened for a living, and his stillness was more terrifying than any rage. "He used the phrase, 'pregnancy brain'?" Harrison asked, his voice soft. "He did, and then he gestured to my stomach and said, 'I need sharks, not this.'" Harrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the blue had turned to ice. "Julian Vance, I remember him. Wharton, same as you. Top of his class. I thought he was hungry. I didn't realize he was depraved." This had all been Clara's idea. A year ago, she had been a rising star at a rival firm, already a junior partner. But she'd been hearing things about her father's company. Rumors, whispers of a toxic Shark Tank culture that had taken root since his retirement. Talk of bullying, of shady accounting, of good people being pushed out. "It's my legacy, Dad," she had told him. "It's our name on the building. I won't let it be rotted from the inside." She'd had one condition. She would go in with her mother's maiden name, Hayes. No one would know who she was. She'd start as a floater, learn the systems, and find the source of the rot. Her father had argued, but she was as stubborn as he was. Her credentials were so good, she was placed as Julian Vance's secretary within a month. His reputation as a difficult manager was legendary, and no one else would take the job. "I thought he was just an arrogant bully, Dad," Clara said, sipping her water. "But this is criminal. Serafina Croft and he, they're stealing." "Stealing?" Harrison sat up. "You have proof?" "More than proof," Clara said. She walked to the desk and pulled out a slim, encrypted flash drive. "Julian thought I was reading baby magazines. I was running forensic accounting on his discretionary marketing funds, the ones he directs to Serafina." She plugged the drive into a laptop. "Serafina isn't just his mistress. She's his launderer. 3 months ago, she incorporated a shell company, Croft Media Solutions. Since then, Julian has approved over $4 million in consulting fees to this company. The invoices are for market synergy analysis and brand strategy. They're boilerplate nonsense." She pulled up another file. "Here are the bank transfers from Croft Media Solutions to an offshore account in the Caymans, an account held by a holding company. And guess who the sole director of that holding company is?" "Julian Vance," Harrison finished, his voice grim. "He wasn't firing me because I'm pregnant," Clara said, the pieces clicking into place. "He was firing me because I was there. I was the one who processed his expense reports. I was the one who saw the invoices. He and Serafina, they thought I was just a dumb, pregnant secretary. They got sloppy. They were afraid I was getting too close. The North Star package, Harrison said. It wasn't just to get you fired. It was a distraction, a big, messy, public execution to draw everyone's attention away from the real crime. Exactly. And they used my pregnancy as the perfect, believable excuse for my incompetence. Harrison stood and walked back to the window. The silence in the room was heavy. David Morrison, Harrison finally said. He's a good man, but he's blind. He wants to see the best in people. He let this happen. What do we do now? Clara asked. Harrison turned. The kindness was gone from his face, replaced by the cool, lethal focus of the architect. Now? Now we remind them whose name is on the building. He picked up his phone. Robert, get the jet ready. We're going to the office. And call an emergency meeting of the entire board of directors. Tell them, Harrison Hayes is back. He looked at his daughter, a fierce pride in his eyes. And Clara, it's time for you to change out of your secretary's uniform. You're going to need your Wharton suit for this. Julian Vance felt like a king. He had slept the sleep of the victorious. The North Star deal was a disaster, yes, but he had already spun it. He had spent all of Friday afternoon in crisis meetings with David Morrison, the CEO. David, I am shattered, Julian had said, a masterpiece of feigned grief. I trusted her. I think I was too sensitive to her condition. I didn't want to add to her stress, so I wasn't as vigilant. I blame myself. Morrison, a man who valued empathy, had bought it. It's a terrible lapse, Julian, but you're right. The timing, it's a mess. Don't worry. Our lawyers will handle the fallout. You just focus on the partnership. We need your leadership. The partnership. It was still his. He had cut the liability, and he was being rewarded for it. Now it was Monday morning. He walked into the lobby of the Vanguard Tower, his $3,000 leather shoes clicking on the granite. He nodded curtly to the security guard, his mind on Serafina, who was already upstairs. She had officially moved her things to Clara's old desk, right outside his glass cube. Everything was in its right place. The elevator was packed with junior analysts, all of whom went silent when he stepped in. He was a god to them. Terrifying, but a god. When he stepped out onto the 50th floor, however, the atmosphere was wrong. It wasn't the usual Monday morning hustle. It was silent, tense. Mary, the older assistant, was at her desk, her eyes red. When she saw Julian, she gave him a look of such pure, unadulterated contempt that it actually made him pause. "Good morning, Mary," he said. Mary just turned back to her screen. He shrugged it off. He walked toward his office. Serafina was not at her new desk. Strange. Then he saw it. An email flagged, urgent mandatory, had arrived at 8:01 a.m. Subject, Emergency Board and Senior Partner Meeting, 9 US a.m. Location, the Founders Boardroom, 52nd floor. Attendance, mandatory, no exceptions. Julian's heart gave a little thrill. This was it. The North Star fallout was over, and this was his promotion. They were gathering the partners to announce him. They were probably fast-tracking it to show the firm was stable, moving forward. He checked his reflection in the glass, straightened his Brioni tie. He was ready. He took the private executive elevator to the 52nd floor. This floor was for board meetings only. It was quiet, opulent, and smelled of old money and furniture polish. He pushed open the massive oak double doors to the founder's boardroom and stopped dead. The room was full. The entire executive board, all 12 members, were seated. David Morrison, the CEO, was there, looking pale and nervous, not at the head of the table but on the side. At the head of the table, In the high-backed chair that had sat empty for 5 years was Harrison Hayes. Julian's blood turned to ice water. He had never met Harrison Hayes. He had only seen the oil portrait of him in the lobby. The man in the portrait was smiling. The man at the table was not. "Mr. Vance," Harrison said, his voice quiet but echoing in the cavernous room. "You're late. Take a seat." Julian's legs felt like lead. He fumbled into the only empty chair. It was at the far end of the table, opposite Harrison. He felt like he was being judged from a mile away. "Where is Seraphina Croft?" Julian managed to ask. "Ms. Croft is indisposed," Harrison said. "She's with our head of security and our internal audit team. It seems there are some irregularities in her marketing budget. But we'll get to that." Julian's mouth went dry. This was not a promotion. "I have been retired for 5 years," Harrison began, his eyes sweeping the table, landing on every single board member. "I left this firm, Vanguard, in your hands. I trusted you to maintain the culture I built, a culture of integrity, of diligence, and of respect." He steepled his fingers, his icy blue gaze finally landing and staying on Julian. "Instead, I find a culture of bullying, of theft, and of staggering incompetence. Mr. Morrison, you were CEO. How did this happen?" David Morrison looked like he was going to be sick. "Harrison, I had no idea. The internal reports, Harrison cut him off, were doctored. The profits from Mr. Vance's division, for example, have been exaggerated. His successes, it seems, were not his own." Julian gripped the arms of his chair. "Mr. Hayes, I don't know what you've been told, but my division is the most profitable in the firm. The Henderson call just last week." "Ah, yes. The Henderson call," Harrison said, a thin smile playing on his lips. "The one you brilliantly saved. A call where you miscalculated a client's exposure by 15%, and your secretary had to slide you the answer." Julian was speechless. How do you—" "I know," Harrison said, "because my head of internal review told me. You see, I've had someone on the inside for the last 8 months. Someone I trust implicitly. Someone with a Wharton MBA, a background in forensic accounting, and a vested interest in this company's good name." Harrison nodded to the double doors. "You can come in now." The doors opened. In walked Clara Hayes. She was not the Clara he knew. The mousy brown hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. The drab maternity blouses were gone, replaced by a dark navy blue Armani pantsuit, custom-tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. She wore her power as comfortably as he wore his arrogance. She looked, Julian realized with a jolt of pure terror, exactly like the man at the other end of the table. She was not carrying a box. She was carrying a leather-bound portfolio. "Clara," Julian breathed, his voice a dry rasp. The rest of the board was staring, their minds scrambling to connect the dots. "That's Ms. Hayes Donovan to you, Mr. Vance," Clara said, her voice clear and cold. She took a seat at the table, to the right of her father. "Clara Hayes Donovan, daughter of Harrison Hayes, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, the new Chief Operating Officer of Vanguard Equity Partners." David Morrison lunged forward. "Harrison, this is my daughter, David," Harrison snapped, "and she is the only person in this room who has done her job. Please, Clara, proceed." Clara opened her portfolio. "Good morning, gentlemen. For the last 8 months, I have been working as an executive assistant to Mr. Vance. My father and I were concerned about the cultural rot that was eroding this firm's foundation. We were right to be." She looked directly at Julian. Her eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were diagnostic. "Mr. Vance," she began, "on Friday, you fired me for gross negligence, specifically for failing to courier the North Star acquisition documents." You didn't send them," Julian stammered, falling back on his lie. "You left them in your desk. Serafina found them." "No," Clara said flatly. "I did not. On Wednesday at 4:51 p.m., I personally logged the package and placed it in the mailroom's secure bin. At 5:37 p.m., she nodded to a man in the corner who dimmed the lights and turned on the large projector screen. Ms. Serafina Croft entered the mailroom. The screen lit up with grainy, time-stamped security footage. Serafina clear as day, distracting the clerk and stealing the red envelope. A collective gasp went around the room. At 7:14 p.m., Clara continued, as the footage changed, Ms. Croft and Mr. Vance are seen entering his office. At 7:19 p.m., Ms. Croft is seen logging into my terminal, using my credentials. She proceeds to delete my confirmation email and the courier appointment. The video was silent, but the implications were deafening. Julian was white. And at 7:21 p.m., Clara said, her voice dropping, Mr. Vance is seen taking the North Star package and placing it inside my desk drawer. The video showed him do it. The board turned as one to stare at him. You, Julian sputtered. "You set me up." "No, Julian," Clara said. "You set yourself up. I was just the secretary. I was just the hormonal, forgetful, pregnant woman. You never, ever thought I'd be a threat. You never thought I mattered. You were so blinded by your own arrogance and your affair that you committed mail fraud and conspiracy right in front of a security camera." "But why?" David Morrison asked, his face ashen. Why would you, Julian? Sabotage a $2 billion deal, just to fire a secretary? That, Harrison Hayes said, is the billion-dollar question. Clara looked back at Julian. The look of a cold, satisfied predator was gone from his face. Now it was just the pathetic, sweaty fear of a man trapped. "He didn't fire me because he thought I was incompetent," Clara said to the board. "He fired me because he was terrified I was competent." She clicked to the next slide. It was a complex flowchart of bank accounts. Julian Vance and Serafina Croft were not just having an affair, Clara announced. They were embezzling. For the last 3 months, Mr. Vance has been approving ghost invoices from a shell marketing company. That company, Croft Media Solutions, was founded by and is solely owned by Ms. Croft. In 90 days, they have siphoned $4.2 million from this firm. She pointed to a line item. This $4.2 million was then wired to a holding company in the Cayman Islands, a holding company named J. Vance Capital. Ring any bells, Julian? Julian Vance made a sound, a low, strangled noise. "I processed those invoices," Clara said. "I saw the signatures. You got sloppy, Julian. You thought I was too stupid or too distracted by my condition to notice that you were approving multi-million-dollar invoices on a Friday afternoon without a single line of due diligence. You fired me to stop me from talking. You fabricated the North Star crisis to make my firing so spectacular, so public, that no one would ever believe a word I said. I would just be the crazy, pregnant secretary who cost us all." She stood up, slowly, and walked around the table until she was standing directly behind him. He was frozen, staring at the screen that showed his financial ruin. "You didn't fire me for your mistress, Julian," she whispered, so only he and the man next to him could hear. "You fired me for your greed. You just used my pregnancy as your excuse. You gestured to my child, my son, and called him a liability. You called me this." She moved back to her seat. "Mr. Vance, you are a thief. You are a conspirator. And worst of all, you are a fool. The heavy oak doors of the founder's boardroom shut with a final, damning click. The silence that fell was heavier than the wood. Harrison Hayes's words, "report," still hung in the air, a guillotine that had just dropped. Julian Vance, a man who had lived his entire life on a diet of adrenaline and other people's fear, was now a statue of pure, waxy terror. The two detectives, businesslike and unimpressed by the bespoke suit and the 52nd floor view, moved to his chair. "Mr. Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and embezzlement," the taller detective said, his voice a monotone that cut through Julian's paralysis. "Please stand and place your hands behind your back." Julian finally broke. It wasn't a snap. It was a crumble. "No," he whimpered, a sound so pathetic it made the board members physically recoil. "No, wait, you don't understand. It was her. It was Serafina. She seduced me. She set this all up. She planted the files. It was her idea." Clara, who had remained standing, let out a sound of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Pathetic," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "Even now, even with the cuffs literally on their way to your wrists, you cannot take responsibility for a single one of your actions. You blame the woman you were sleeping with. You blame the woman you fired. You are a black hole of a man, Julian. Nothing is ever your fault." As the cold steel clicked shut around his wrists, Julian's terror-fueled denial finally cracked, revealing the raw, venomous hatred beneath. He surged to his feet, a snarling, cornered animal. "You!" he spat at Clara, his face purple. "A secretary. You set me up. This was all you." "I did my job, Julian," Clara said, her voice impossibly calm. "The one I was hired for, the one you paid me for. You just never bothered to ask what it was. You thought I was there to fetch your coffee. I was there to protect my family's name." Marcus Thorne, a senior partner and Julian's primary ally on the board, finally found his voice. "Harrison, this is madness," he sputtered, standing up. "Arresting a senior VP in the boardroom? The PR fallout. This is precipitous. We need to handle this internally." Harrison Hayes didn't even turn his head. "Sit down, Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're embarrassed because you backed the wrong horse. You're part of the internal problem I'm handling." He nodded to the detectives. "Get him out of my sight." The detectives began to pull Julian toward the door. As he passed Clara, he lunged, his cuffed hands straining. "You'll run this company into the ground, you sentimental bitch. This place needs sharks, and you're just weak." Clara didn't flinch. She stood her ground, forcing the detectives to yank him back. She looked him dead in the eye, her gaze a surgeon's scalpel. "My sentiment, Julian, is the one variable your arrogant mind never accounted for. My sentiment is for the 4,000 employees whose futures you gambled with. My sentiment is for the name my father built. You only accounted for your wallet. Enjoy your new accommodations. I hear the views are terrible." His shriek of rage was cut off as the doors closed behind him. The room exhaled. Harrison Hayes let the silence stretch for a beat before he spoke. "As for Ms. Croft," he said, "she is in a conference room on the 40th floor with our audit team and her own lawyer. Faced with the video evidence, she has already provided a full confession, attempting, like Mr. Vance, to pin the entire scheme on him. It won't work. She will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." He then turned his gaze, which had lost none of its icy fire, on the remaining men. "And now, to the board." His eyes landed on David Morrison. The CEO looked 60 seconds from a heart attack. "David," Harrison said, and the use of his first name was a judgment in itself. "You are a good man. You are a kind man. You are not a leader. You let this infection fester in my company because you were too afraid to ask hard questions. You valued stability over integrity, and in doing so, you nearly cost us both." Morrison stood, his hands shaking. "Harrison, I am so sorry. Clara, Miss Hayes Donovan, I had no idea. I am terribly, terribly sorry for what he did to you." Clara cut him off, not with malice, but with precision. "David, your job wasn't to have an idea. It was to know. You were the custodian of this firm, and you let the wolves into the nursery. Your apology is noted. Your resignation is accepted. You will leave with your full pension, but you will sign an NDA that ensures you never speak the name Vanguard again." Morrison nodded, utterly broken, and walked out of the room. "Marcus," Harrison said, turning to the last dissenter, "you backed him. You championed his shark mentality. You're out. Clean your desk." "You can't do this," Marcus blustered. "I can," Harrison said. "This entire board is dissolved, effective immediately. It will be reconstituted under the new COO's direction by the end of the day. You can leave on your own, or you can follow Mr. Vance in cuffs for aiding and abetting. Your choice." Marcus Thorne, his face pale, fled the room. Finally they were alone. Just Harrison and Clara in the vast, silent boardroom. The morning sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Harrison let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 5 years. "Well, Madam Coe," he said, a weary pride in his voice, "your first day has been eventful." Clara walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city 52 floors below. The same view Julian had prized. "He wasn't the only rot, Dad," she said quietly. "He was just the loudest. The culture here. It's broken. It's what you always taught me not to be." Harrison came to stand beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "I know," he said, his voice thick with a rare emotion. "I let it get away from me. I was so busy building the machine, I forgot about the people inside it. I was so afraid of being done, of being irrelevant in retirement. I let profit become a substitute for purpose." He turned to her, his blue eyes searching hers. "That's why you are the new COO, not me. I'm going back into retirement, for real this time. This is your firm now, Clara. Fix it." Clara put her hand over his, her other hand resting on her belly. "I'm scared, Dad. It's so broken. And with the baby." "Your pregnancy isn't a liability, Clara," he said fiercely, echoing her earlier words. "It's a perspective. It's your greatest asset. You're not just building for the next quarter. You're building for the next generation. That's what I lost. That's what you'll bring back. Now, shall we go reintroduce you to your new team?" They walked together to the 50th floor. The atmosphere was a funeral. The entire floor was frozen, watching them. They saw Julian's glass cube, now empty. They saw security guards boxing up Seraphina's things from Clara's old desk. Clara walked to the center of the floor. Everyone stared, whispering. "Mary," Clara called out. Mary at her desk looked up, her eyes wide with terror. She thought she was next. She slowly approached. "Clara, Miss Hayes. Miss Hayes Donovan." Clara smiled, a real, warm smile. "Mary, for 8 months, you were the only person on this floor who showed me genuine kindness. You have more integrity in your fingernail than Mr. Vance had in his entire body. You are my new executive administrator. Your title and your pay will reflect your seniority and your value. We start now." Mary's hands flew to her mouth, and she burst into tears of sheer, unadulterated relief. It was the first crack in the ice. That afternoon, Clara held an all-hands, town hall, in the firm's main atrium. She stood in front of 500 employees, her father standing off to the side, a proud observer. She used no microphone. Her voice, trained in Wharton lecture halls, carried. "My name is Clara Hayes Donovan," she began. "My father, Harrison Hayes, built this firm. For the last 8 months, you knew me as Clara Hayes. On Friday, many of you watched me get fired, humiliated, and escorted from this building. This morning, you watched Mr. Vance get arrested." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. "The era of Vanguard as a shark tank is over," she declared. "Sharks are lazy, solitary predators. They eat their own. From today, we will be a wolf pack. We are intelligent, we are strategic, we are collaborative, and we protect our own. This will be a place of integrity first. Profit second, because integrity, in the long run, is profit." She laid out her new vision. "The rot stops today. I am firing every manager in this firm with a credible HR complaint of bullying or harassment. Their positions will be filled from within. And my first act as COO," she paused, her hand going to her stomach, "is to announce the new Vanguard parental leave policy. 6 months, fully paid, for all employees, mothers, fathers, and adoptive parents, because family is not a liability. It is our foundation." A stunned silence. Then, led by Mary, a slow, building wave of applause that became a roar. The next 6 months were a war. The sharks she fired didn't go quietly. Marcus Thorne's allies tried to sue for wrongful termination. Clara countered, in person, with the meticulous evidence of their complicity and incompetence she had gathered as a secretary. Forbes magazine ran a scathing article titled, "The Heiress's Hobby: Can a Pregnant Idealist Run a Wall Street Firm?" Clara's response was to write a fiery op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, titled, "Yes, She Can, and She's Doing It." It went viral. She was vilified on financial TV as sentimental and naive, then praised by a new generation as a visionary. The firm's best and brightest, who had been suffocating under the old guard, flocked to her. Profits dipped for 1 quarter, then soared, driven by a new, massive, green energy fund she had personally championed. The legal reckoning was absolute. Serafina Croft, faced with the video and her own paper trail, folded completely. She testified against Julian, detailing his greed and his paranoia. She received 2 years in a low-security federal prison. Julian, blinded by his own narcissism, made the fatal mistake of refusing a plea deal. He was convinced he could charm a jury. The trial was a circus. He painted himself as a visionary, betrayed by a spurned lover and a conniving secretary. But the prosecution had Clara's meticulous notes, the high-definition security footage, and the bank transfers. The jury convicted him on all counts in under 45 minutes. At his sentencing, the judge, a woman in her 60s, looked down at him with contempt. "Mr. Vance," she said, "you are a man of profound arrogance and a complete lack of character. Your crimes were not of passion, but of a cold, calculated greed. But what the court finds most appalling is your cruel and unusual humiliation of an employee in a vulnerable condition. You used a woman's pregnancy as a weapon. You are, in short, a bully. You are sentenced to 8 years in a state penitentiary." He screamed, a high, thin sound of disbelief as he was led away. 8 months after the boardroom coup, the 50th floor was unrecognizable. It was bright. The glass cube of Julian's office had been dismantled, replaced by a large, open-plan collaborative workspace. People were talking, laughing, arguing over whiteboards. Clara sat in her new office, a warmer space with comfortable chairs, on the same floor as her team. She was on a conference call, finalizing the acquisition of a tech startup. Her desk was covered in reports, but also a small, silver-framed sonogram. She was in mid-sentence when she stopped, her breath catching. She smiled, a small, tired but triumphant smile. Mary, now her unflappable chief of staff, noticed immediately. "Ms. Hayes." It is," Clara breathed, closing her laptop. "Call my husband, and tell the Tokyo board. The call will have to be rescheduled for tomorrow morning. My son has decided on an earlier-than-expected arrival." Harrison Hayes met her at the elevator, holding a brand-new baby carrier, beaming. "Ready, Madam Coe?" "More than ready, Dad," she said, squeezing his arm. As the elevator doors closed, the floor didn't panic. They didn't whisper. They stood, and they applauded their leader. Clara Hayes Donovan had built a company that could run without her for a few hours, or a few months. The new foundation was strong. It wasn't built on fear. It was built on trust. What a story of karma and consequences. It just goes to show that you never, ever know who you're talking to. Julian's arrogance and cruelty weren't just his moral failing. They were his financial ruin. He saw a pregnant secretary as a weak, disposable problem, but he was actually abusing the most powerful person in the building. Clara proved that true strength isn't about yelling, bullying, or wearing an expensive suit. It's about intelligence, patience, and knowing exactly when to make your move. She didn't just get revenge. She rebuilt an entire company in her own, stronger image. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Was it satisfying? Let me know in the comments what your favorite part of the story was. If you loved this story, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another real-life drama. We have new stories coming every week. Thanks for listening.